Welcome into Maybe I'm the Crazy One podcast, and I'm your host, Alex Chandler. Never being one to share a take with anyone I know, I'd figured I'd start taking down my ideas and sharing them with you here. Every week, we will explore parts of the sports world, and I will give you my viewpoints. Maybe I'm a genius, or maybe I'm just crazy. Tune in with me and find out for yourself. Man, we're so excited to have you guys in today. Episode 3. It's going to be a great one. We have a lot of great topics to talk about today. We're going to get to the Baker Mayfield trade. We're going to talk a little bit about Summer League and Chet Holmgren and Paulo Banchero and Jabari Parker and how they've looked in Summer League so far, if it's important or not. We're going to talk a little bit about the college sports realignment that's going on currently that we're going to see as the season progresses, the off season and into the regular year. We're going to see kind of what things transpire and break down. And my ideas for college sports realignment. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about, it's going to be an ongoing running segment that we're going to have over the next few weeks. I am going to break down each division episode by episode until we finally get to the playoffs and eventually crown a Super Bowl champion in the offseason. But before we get to any of that, I do want to take a second and thank every single one of you who have turned in and listened to the podcast so far. Support has been phenomenal. We do appreciate all of the kind words that have been given, the compliments, comments, critiques. We are working to get the show to be better for everyone as we continue to move forward, as we gain more followers. If you're new to the podcast today, kind of how this works, you're allowed to basically give me whatever feeling you have. I'm taking all feedback, all criticism, all compliments, whatever it may be, cataloging it to try to make this a better experience for you. The podcast doesn't exist without you listening. And so because of that, I understand, your role in this, my role in this is to listen. And so, providing as much feedback as you possibly can to me to make this show better for you as well is wildly important to me. But let's go ahead and get started with our topics nonetheless. You turned in here not to listen to me say thank you for 45 minutes, but to actually talk about sports. And so that's what we're going to get to. On Thursday, July 7th, 2022, Baker Mayfield was traded from the Cleveland Browns for a 5th-round pick that may become a 4th-round pick if he plays up to 70% of the snaps this season for them. This move is a great move for Baker Mayfield. He is moving from a division where he was arguably the 3rd best quarterback, potentially 4th best quarterback if Kenny Pickett ends up being a great player, to right now he would be the 2nd best quarterback potentially in the NFC South. I haven't delved too far into the NFC South yet. That is going to be for Tuesday's podcast when we break down. But for the NFC South currently, I look at it and I say we got Tom Brady, obviously number 1 right there. Then number 2, I would put Baker Mayfield, because number 3 would be Jameis Winston, who's coming off of that ACL injury, and we don't know how he's going to come back. If he comes back looking just like he did last year before the injury, then obviously I'm going to take Jameis Winston before Baker Mayfield. He looked really good in those first 6 starts. However, if he comes back like most players do when they're in their late 20s, early 30s from an injury, and they've shown a propensity to not be able to take care of their body the greatest way, like Jameis has, then I think there's a chance that you see some drop-off there. But if he also doesn't come back to start the season healthy, or he's not the starter when the season, starts and it's Taysom Hill or whoever it is, Baker Mayfield is obviously better than any other quarterback the Saints could roll out there right now. And then you look at the Falcons and they have Marcus Mariota, who I believe is going to be better than people give him credit for. However, he's still Marcus Mariota right now. I look at him more as a backup than I do as a starter, but this is his chance to actually get some starting reps. So ultimately, he goes in from being in a division with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, and was Ben Roethlisberger, now it's going to be Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky, to now he's going to, powerful. He's going to be in a division with more inferior competition at the quarterback level, at least. Additionally, there's a lot of stress and pressure on Matt Rule to win this year. Dave Tepper is not one that he has shown, at least, to be somebody to wait and be patient for wins. He is in win now mode. More win now mode than I think Cleveland is. Cleveland, they have a lot more security. Cleveland, they have a lot more stability right now, ironically. And with that, Baker loses out a little bit. However, I think the win now approach is something that Baker thrives in. When the chips are down, when everybody's against you, Baker Mayfield steps up. That is what I have seen. He was the guy that came in and took over a team that had been 1-31 in its last 2 seasons. Took over that team that was 0-2-1 and then finished the season 7-6. Or the guy last year who gutted through an injury just so that there wasn't the question of Baker's not tough enough to play, because that was also a narrative, which then shifted because he played poorly to Baker can now no longer play the game of football as a quarterback. And I just have a question for those people who really feel that way. Has your quarterback averaged 8.5 wins a season? Because Baker has. Baker is 30-30 in his career. He's missed 5 games. 2 to injury, 3 to start his rookie year. That's it. And in that time frame, he's gone 30-30. Now, he has lost half of his games. That is true. But again, part of that was last year when he was hurt and his rookie year. His time in between those 2 years, he was a lot better. He was a performer. He was a Pro Bowler. He won a playoff game for Cleveland for the first time in 25 years, and then almost beat the Chiefs to get to the AFC Championship game in Arrowhead. Baker has value in this league. Baker is an NFL quarterback. Now, whether it's a starting quarterback, a backup quarterback, I'm not entirely sure. I do believe that Baker is probably a back-end quarterback in terms of, like, if you look at 1-32, he's probably in the back half, but he's at the front of the back half. So 16, 17, 18, and that's still a viable quarterback in this league. Could you win a championship with Baker? Possibly. You mean Trent Dilfer's won a Super Bowl, right? And Trent Dilfer actually was the comp that a lot of people give Baker Mayfield. And so you can win a Super Bowl, I guess, with Baker Mayfield. But I also have the exact same feeling and belief about, a dozen other guys in the league. There's only about 5 or 6 guys I am sure of I can win a Super Bowl with right now in this exact moment. And that's Tom Brady, that's Patrick Mahomes, that's Matt Stafford, Joey Burrow, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's 5. Josh Allen, 6 maybe? I don't know, man. Like, I put him in the same category that I would put the Russell Wilsons, the Kyler Murrays, the Kirk Cousins, like the guys that can play the sport and play the position well, but I don't know if they're winners, man. Like, in terms of winning a Super Bowl. But I think you could still potentially win the Super Bowl if they're your quarterback, So I think Carolina got better here because I don't think Darnold's in that class, and I don't think Matt Corral's ready to be playing yet. But they did spend draft capital on a quarterback, and I think Matt Corral could be a good quarterback, but I think he's a lot of the same mold as Baker, as in terms of, is he that guy that you could win a title with? I don't think he's Malik Willis, who I had as the best quarterback in this class. I don't even think he might be Kenny Pickett per se. But he is a good quarterback that deserves the opportunity to play, especially if Baker struggles down the stretch. I do not want to see Sam Darnold unless it's early in the season and Baker's been hurt. And even then, I would still prefer to play the kid. But I would understand Matt Rule playing Sam Darnold in that situation because he is on the hot seat and he does need to win games. And so winning is important right now. And I think they were going to roll out, honestly, with Matt Corral if they didn't trade for Baker Mayfield. And so I think Baker has a good opportunity to earn himself a new job next year. I do not think he's going to be in Carolina next year. I think he would be somewhere else. It's just a matter of where that somewhere else is. If he performs well, say he plays all 17, goes 9-8 with the Carolina team, as long as he's positive in yards and positive in TD to interception ratio in a decent amount, I'm not saying he needs to go 30-2, but he could go, 29 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I think that would be enough. I think that would be enough to say, hey, Baker has the ability to take your team, as long as you have the infrastructure, as far as you want to go in the playoffs. And so you could look at a team like a Minnesota maybe, who would want to move off of Kirk potentially, that has that infrastructure set up that he could then go re-sign for, or not re-sign rather, but sign for elsewhere. I think this is absolutely a one-year deal for them, both for Carolina and for Baker. And so let's see what that does for them. I will have that breakdown for us on Tuesday, like I have stated. But we got to talk about Baker's alma mater and Baker's old coach, Lincoln Riley, in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's going to the SEC, joining, that super conference now. And his coach, Lincoln Riley, went from his alma mater at Oklahoma over to USC, and now USC is going to the Big Ten. I'm not going to be one of those people here that are like, oh man, we need to go back to the way that the Big Ten and Pac-12 were because tradition, history, all of that. No, not at all. I think this is the best move for college sports. I do not think there needs to be 25 different conferences to play the game of football. I don't like that. I don't think it helps anybody. I think raising tides lift all boats. That is my firm belief. And so if you were to take smaller club schools, and I say smaller club just from a perspective look, right? Like you could take your lower level Tulanes, for example, right? Your Tulsas. You could put them into a bigger conference. And it benefits everybody. There's more revenue sharing. It hurts the bigger schools that are already there, but it helps the smaller schools, which ultimately in the long term would end up helping the big schools. If you had Oklahoma and Tulsa playing every 2 years, Tulsa's eventually going to be better. I think there needs to be a more regionalized approach to college sports, but it needs to be more fluid. What I would do is I would establish 4 or 5 total conferences, and every team be aligned regionally. And so the West Coast would have its West Coast division, but instead of it being called necessarily the Pac-12, it would just be College Football West, right? And instead of it having, the 12 teams that are in there, you would lump in Colorado State, New Mexico State, Wyoming, Boise State, those other smaller schools that are still quality schools that you can keep on that side and end up having, 28, 30 teams in that conference. You can then subdivision that out, have your own subdivisions, and then, have your own mini playoff even if you wanted to for the title. You could, rotate it. You could, however you wanted to look at it, you could set it up that way. You could then have one for the Midwest, which would include, Oklahoma, Iowa State, probably Colorado at that point. You would want to pull them back over because they are a more Midwest positioned team. You could have Nebraska back in that conference with K-State, Kansas, and Missouri even. Texas, all the Texas schools would be a part of it. You'd go up to Minnesota. Minnesota would end up being a part of it. You would have your North Dakotas and your South Dakota schools. You would have basically everything in the middle of the country. And this is where it kind of gets wonky, because then your next 2 divisions that you would separate are going to, instead of being, basically vertical lines down the United States, you're looking at 2 horizontal lines. You're going to have your northeast and you're going to have your southeast. And your northeast is going to include your Ohio States, your Michigans, but it's also going to include your Syracuse. It's going to include your Rutgers. It's going to include the smaller schools like Buffalo. It's going to include Eastern Michigan and Central Michigan. Schools like that you can also build additional rivalries out of. And then you're going to cut it probably at Kentucky, maybe, just so you can keep that interpersonal relationship. Or you could even put Kentucky in the north, and then in the south you can put Tennessee. But ultimately you would have your SEC, but then you're also including Clemson in that conference. You're including Duke and North Carolina in those conferences. And so you're getting some of those ACC coastal schools added to it, and you're getting more regionalized content as well. Additionally, you could then set up a 14-game schedule if you wanted to for college football. You would have all of your games are basically conference games at that point. And then you would have your interconference games where you would then go against your other, quote-unquote conferences. So you would have a game against the Northeast. You would have a game against the Midwest. You would have a game against the West. You could go one step further. Say you're going to play 8 games inside of your own conference, and then you're going to play 6 games outside of the conference, 2, 1 home, 1 away for each individual conference. So you could set up an Alabama versus USC at home, and you could also set up an Alabama versus Oregon on the road. You could set up a Kansas State versus Ohio State on the road, and you could set up a Kansas State versus Syracuse at home. Things like that would really entice teams to, see what they're doing, but also limited quantity, but keep you more regionalized with your support. And, that would also mean that you're going to have different conference games each year, so you may not play the same conference teams each year, which will then also lend to the longevity of games matter more when they happen. For example, being here in Kansas City, I could go to a KU game 30 minutes away every single year against Kansas State, or 2 hours away if I went to Manhattan to play that game. But those games don't matter as much because they play each other every year. However, if KU and K-State were to play each other every 3 years, because the other years they're playing Nebraska or Colorado or Missouri in that slot and not KU, which wouldn't make much sense for this specific reason because they're a rivalry, so you would want that one every year. But say it wasn't a rivalry and you could have it, the way that it is, at that point, you're absolutely looking at that game mattering more, so more fans would show up. You're going to have more butts in seats more frequently, and you're going to have less of those games where it looks like, oh, we're at social distancing capacity, which it's not the case half the time. The SEC schools don't need that. I know the Big Ten schools don't need that, and then the coastal schools also don't need that. But the teams that are not a part of that group, those groupings that I just listed, they do need some of that support sometimes. You can see a KU Oklahoma game, and there's going to be a bunch of people there, but then you see a KU Norfolk State game, and there's practically no one there. So college football deserves to have larger conferences. However, they need to be positioned better. And I don't like the 2-conference model that a lot of people are throwing out there where everybody's going to be a part of the Big Ten, everyone's going to be a part of the SEC. Those are the 2 that you're going to be a part of. Ultimately, I don't necessarily like that version of it. I think it does need to be broken down a little bit further, because ultimately what you would do in that regard anyway is you would have your SEC and your Big Ten. They're splitting basically across the country horizontally at that point. And then you're still breaking it down regionally to Southwest, Southeast, and South Central, and then North Central, Northeast, Northwest. It's basically the same thing. It's just a little bit different. You get a little bit more customization if you break it down to 4 and then break it into divisions as opposed to 2 and then divisions. Ultimately, though, what do we look at college sports as? We look at it as a pathway to the pros, right? While there's a lot of kids that go to college and play college athletics that don't end up as a professional athlete, we still look at the game itself, whether it's football or basketball, baseball, etc., as a pathway to the pros. And I know the NBA recently brought the G League out, but a lot of the players that were drafted at the top of the draft this year were still college players, including Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren, right? And speaking of which, they're playing right now in the Summer League. And I have some feelings about the Summer League that we'll get to here in just a second. But I want to start with one of those three guys that I just talked about. Not Paolo Banchero. We're going to start with Chet Holmgren today. Chet's game 1 in the NBA Summer League. Now, granted, it was the Salt Lake City Summer League. But his game 1 was marvelous. 23 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 blocks on 7 of 9 shooting. Kind of put that in historical context. It was the most blocks in a Summer League game in NBA history. He was also the first player to have 5 blocks and 4 3-pointers made in a single game in NBA history. At least Summer League history. Let me rephrase that. Now, his second game, because of the way that the Salt Lake City Summer League is set up, it was a back-to-back. All 3 games were back-to-back-to-back. And in game 2, he did suffer from a little bit of fatigue, but he had 11 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 more blocks. And so on 50% shooting for the 2 games that he played, as he sat the third game due to rest, because they're starting this weekend in another Summer League in Vegas, he averaged 17, 9.5, 3.5, and 4 blocks on 50% shooting. Even if you took a step back and say he shot 48% the way that he plays and ends up at 16, 8, 3, and 2 for the first season that he plays in the actual NBA, that's a fringe all-star guy for a center. Now, I don't think he would be an all-star guy this year. I don't think he would get those votes, but he would be first-team all-rookie. He'd have a great chance to being the rookie of the year. And I think that he has the ability with Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to lead the Thunder to potentially the play-in game. There's a lot of talent on that team. Now, watching the Summer League games, I thought Giddey looked phenomenal and out of place with the rest of those guys that were on that court. And the reason I feel that way is because he's an NBA-level player and really shouldn't be playing in the Summer League. And so that brings me to my point of the Summer League itself and, what is it actually good for? Well, I think it's really important for these guys to be in the Summer League because it does give you that true feel of what the NBA is going to feel like. I also like having older players, not just brand new drafted players or unrestricted free agents or undrafted free agents. I like having those older players there because it does let you have that barometer of, okay, this rookie that we just took, how good is he actually, right? And in this case for Chet, he's really good. For Paolo Banchero, when he played Jabari Parker, Thursday night, I believe, he looked really good. Now, I don't think he looked better than Chet has, but he still looked really good, and he validated them taking him over Jabari or even Chet in that regard. Now, Saturday night, Jabari and Chet play each other, so that's going to be really interesting to see what that does. But basically, that's where my desire or affinity to what is Summer League kind of ends. My opinion, Summer League only matters when you're watching a player and they look like they don't belong on the court, whether it's positive or negative. For example, Josh Giddey this last week, in the 3 games he played, absolutely looked like a head and shoulders above every single other player that was on the court. He did not need to be at Summer League. That man is going to be an all-star potentially as early as this year. I am really high on Josh Giddey. But that's what I believe Summer League should be used for. I watched that game and I said, man, that guy doesn't need to be here. He's ready to be an NBA player right now. And a lot of times you'll see their teams and shut players down in the Summer League, whether it be from injury because it's a minor injury, but we don't want to escalate it any further. But you also see teams do this thing where they'll get certain views. They'll look at the player a certain way and say, all right, we've seen enough. He can sit the rest of the Summer League and, just start his off-season work basically. Still training with the team, doing the things, practice and such. But in terms of actually playing, we're not going to risk you being out there because we've already seen what we want to see from you. You don't belong on this court. Let's see some other young guys. And in that regard, I think it's important as well. Because you also get those guys that show up and you're like, you don't deserve to be here at all. Why are you on this court? And it really helps those teams flush out those younger guys. And for them, like the moment that they're there for the tournament, the summer league, whatever it may be, that's more for them to be able to establish a two-way contract, whether it's to get them to the G League or ultimately to the NBA. But I think a lot of those guys are going to end up with, two-way contracts and be playing for affiliates of the teams that they're on at that point, which is fine. I mean, G League contracts are still NBA contracts. You're still getting paid to play basketball, a kid's game. So it's great for those guys too. I just don't know, like for the middle guys, that you're not looking at the high end side, the low end side. Where's the real value for them? I went back and did some research. The Summer League gives out an MVP every year. Over the last 15 years, there's been 16 winners in 1 year where we didn't have a Summer League. There were 2 co-MVPs. And I'm going to start listing off some of the names that were a part of those 15 guys. And you're going to see a deep drop-off. So in 2012, Dame won MVP of the Summer League. In 2010, John Wall won it. 2009, Blake Griffin won it. Okay. 2013, I think it was Jonas Valanciunas. 2014, it was Tyus Jones. 2019, Brandon Clark. But then it starts to get a little questionable of like, how valuable is winning the MVP Summer League? Or Summer League MVP, sorry for the syntax error. Then you got guys like Josh Selby, who was co-MVP with Dame. You got Randy Foye, who was an MVP in 2006. Like, there's a bunch of guys that you look at it and you say, that was the best player that year? And, there's some guys like Lonzo and Josh Hart who won it in back-to-back years for the Lakers in 17 and 18. But for the most part, the guys that are winning Summer League MVP, those guys are going to be your role player guys. They're not your high-end guys. So you're giving rewards out for people, basically, to come in and not be superstars. Give them that participation trophy of the NBA. I don't like that. So, there's a lot of things in Summer League that I don't agree on. But ultimately, I think it is beneficial for the both edges of the spectrum. So the high end of the spectrum for those great players that are going to having great careers, and the low end of the spectrum to say, hey guys, maybe we reached on our evaluation on this player. Let's send him down to the G League. Let's, give him another chance on another team, whatever it may be, to really shape out those rosters to be as good as they can be. And we started this whole segment with, about Chet Holmgren and Paolo Banchero and, those rookie draft, the rookie draft class that we had this year. And I think they're going to be great kids. Jaden Ivey, for example, on Thursday night had an incredible pass that didn't end up in an assist, but he had an incredible pass. And I think there's a lot of talent that we're going to see on display through the Vegas Summer League that we see over the next couple of weeks. And I imagine we'll talk about it in some capacity in case something incredible happens, like Chet's performance in the Salt Lake City Summer League. However, I'm not putting a whole lot of credence into it. I think I saw some things from Chet that will be able to be displayed on a regular NBA basketball court, like during a regular season or even a playoff game. And he's obviously going to get better, being only a 19-year-old kid. But I just don't know how much Summer League actually matters in the grand scheme of things. Like how much it actually matters to a player's ability or even of the way to evaluate a truly great player. Just because the talent pool is so dynamic in terms of you have players that are at the bottom of the talent pool that are there just based upon their work ethic. And then you have players that are just wildly talented at the top. So there's more variability in Summer League in terms of the talent pool than there would be in a regular NBA game. The floor gets brought tremendously higher for an actual NBA game as opposed to a summer league game, but there is value to it. And so we're just going to have to watch and see what these kids do over the next couple weeks and if we see any value come from it. And so we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll bring up topics from this summer league over the next few weeks that we feel are important. But we do have to transition to our final topic of the day. Now, you may feel like it's coming a little bit earlier than we normally would have the final topic of the day, but that's for a couple of reasons. One, it's because we cut a topic from the segment today, as I'm going to be doing a special episode on it tomorrow. And then the second reason is because we're going to spend a little bit more time on the final segment of the show. Now, the final segment of the show today, as well as it will be for the next few weeks, will be based upon breaking down each division in the NFL as a primer to the NFL season. Today, we're going to start with the AFC South. So first things first with the AFC South, let's go ahead and remind you of some of the big moves, or at least big storylines of moves that happened this offseason. We'll start with probably what was the biggest move, when that was Houston trading Deshaun Watson to the Cleveland Browns for a draft pick treasure trove. You also had Matt Ryan going from Atlanta to the Colts. That move was a lot less expensive than Deshaun Watson to the Browns, but rightfully so, as Matt Ryan is a little bit older, has a little bit less in the tank. His contract was also a little bit lesser in terms of, Deshaun getting $231 million guaranteed at signing. The other big moves were Malik Willis was drafted by the Titans. There was that big story with Ryan Tannehill saying that it wasn't his job to be his mentor, which I agree with. That's a different conversation, for a little bit later in this show, potentially. And then Doug Peterson was signed to be the quarterback guru with Trevor Lawrence down in Jacksonville. Those are the four biggest moves I think each individual team made. Now, they also made a collection of, smaller moves that they feel like help their team in the long run, whether it is to win a championship or just to be better. But either way, those are the four big moves that I saw each individual team make, whether it was setting it up for the future or for now. Now, there's some thoughts and feelings that I have from what I watched and witnessed, whether it was from college last year, this offseason, or even just the last previous NFL season, that I think are kind of important, that are going to shape the way that the division plays out. First off, I think Davis Mills is a real quarterback. And so I don't think that those picks that Houston ended up getting in the Deshaun Watson trade are going to be used on a quarterback. I think they'll be used on pieces to put around Davis Mills. Davis Mills last year showed us, with absolutely zero talent on that team, that he was at least a viable starter. He didn't have any of the lows that the other rookie quarterbacks that we see have. But on the flip side of that too, I don't think we saw any of the highs that we saw with, like, say, a Mac Jones or even Trevor Lawrence being exciting down in Jacksonville. As for Trevor Lawrence, once I reveal the win totals here, he's going to see an uptick in his win total, and I think he's going to at least double, if not triple, his win total going into this year. I think the Titans take a step back. I think Derrick Henry being a year older isn't helpful for them, as well as I think there is some kind of internal struggle between Malik Willis and Ryan Tannehill. I think Ryan Tannehill will start the season. I think Ryan Tannehill is probably the better quarterback right now, but I think Malik Willis, especially if the season goes sideways, not only will step in and potentially pull on Lamar Jackson when he took over for Joe Flacco and lead his team to the playoffs. If it's not this year, then he'll definitely take over next year, and we might see a different, team, but we can discuss that next year. And then lastly, Matt Ryan has a real chance to be a contender again with the Colts. I think if Jonathan Taylor can continue to elevate his game and elevate the team with his running displays, and Matt Ryan is just Matt Ryan, I think you have a really scary team there. And so when you look at the division, and you look at the games that they have to play, you have Tennessee playing a first place schedule, the Colts playing a second place schedule. the Texans playing a third-place schedule, and the Jaguars playing a fourth-place schedule. Because of these things, I absolutely see Trevor Lawrence going from 2 wins to, let's say, at least 4 wins. However, here in just a second, when I reveal all my information, I think they go a little bit higher than that. The Texans, on their hand, they're going to play that third-place schedule that they have, and that's kind of unfair to them because they were still a bottom-level team. It was just Jacksonville was that much worse than them. However, I think Davis Mills is good, but how much talent else do they have around him? I don't think it's a whole lot. And so I think with that, I think the Texans will suffer. Potentially Davis Mills will because, he's going to be their starting quarterback. And so if they have a bad season and he's marginally average or slightly above average, there might be some questions about his ability to play quarterback for that team going forward. I think, there's a lot of things that I feel about Malik Willis in Tennessee. First off, Malik Willis was my number 1 rated quarterback in the draft. When I was going through and I was evaluating the talent in the draft, I said Malik Willis is going to be the best talent from this class in terms of quarterback. And then he went in the 3rd round. Not only that, he went near the end of the 3rd round to Tennessee. And at the time, I was like, man, that's a really good move. And then I remembered they traded A.J. Brown. And I said, wow, okay. Now, they made some other moves. They went and traded for Robert Woods. And if Derrick Henry doesn't start off strong for the season, they're going to be in trouble. And I think Ryan Tannehill loses his job early. I'm talking week 5, week 6. If they're winning, I don't think they make the change. But if they're 500, 3rd in the division, whatever it may be at that time, they're moving to Malik Willis. And they should. I think, like I said, Malik Willis is the best quarterback from this draft. And I don't think it's close. I really was high on Malik Willis. I think he has the arm talent. He has the decision making, even though he was playing at a lower level school with Liberty. I think he displayed good decision making. And he just seems like an overall good guy. Not that Ryan Tannehill isn't. That doesn't really matter for being a quarterback, except when you're looking at being a leader. And it seems to be that when he was at Liberty, he was able to get players to play above their level as well. And then now, he's moving into this role. They're not looking at it as a mentor-mentee relationship, as Ryan Tannehill stated. They're looking at it as a competition. And that's what I saw from the Ryan Tannehill comment from earlier in the summer in the offseason, when he said that I'm not here to be his mentor, I'm here to compete with him. And if he picks things up for me along the way, so be it. That's the right mentality to have. That tells me that you, as a player, believe in yourself, but also recognize somebody else's talent. If Malik Willis wasn't good enough to be a starting quarterback, Ryan Tannehill wouldn't make that statement. The question also wouldn't be asked. Like flatly. There's no question that would be asked there. For example, New England's first-round pick last year, Mac Jones, started the whole season, and their team drafted another quarterback this year in Bailey Zapp. Is Bailey Zapp going to overtake Mac Jones? Is Bailey Zapp getting, questioned, saying, hey, are you going to overtake Mac Jones? What are you going to learn from Mac Jones? And I understand they're both young players, and Ryan Tannehill is an established veteran, and Malik Willis is a young player, so it's a little different. But that's the thing, guys. There's not a reason that we need to be having this conversation. The Titans didn't come out and say, man, Malik Willis is going to overtake Ryan Tannehill. Malik didn't even come out and say, I'm going to overtake Ryan Tannehill. Malik did come out and say, I have no problem with what Ryan said. Ryan's right. We're here to compete. I'm just going to take as much as I can from him in every way, shape, and form. And if I ask him questions, he's going to answer them for me. That's what he's done for me already. I have a great relationship with Ryan Tannehill. That is what a team is. We made that way bigger of a story than it actually was. And so, could it be a problem in the future? Yeah. If Ryan struggles, or if the other option is Ryan doesn't struggle, he's just not good enough. and they replace him because they feel like Malik gives them a better chance to win, then you could potentially see some, drama, some rift in that team. But right now, that's not the case. But that leads me to the King Beaters and the leaders in the clubhouse, in my opinion, for the division lead, and that's the Colts. I think the Colts were good with Carson Wentz. I think it was an overreaction to say that Carson Wentz was the problem. The Jaguars have beaten the Colts the last 5 years in Jacksonville. That wasn't a Carson Wentz thing. Carson Wentz was only there for 1 year. As a matter of fact, they had different starting quarterbacks for every single one of those games. So it wasn't necessarily a QB thing either. It's really just they can't win in Jacksonville. When going through my list of games that they're going to win or not win, I gave them a loss this year in Jacksonville. Because that's just what the Colts do. They lose in Jacksonville. And so when they traded Carson Wentz, I said, that wasn't the problem, but you needed a scapegoat. Okay. And then they went and got an upgrade in Matt Ryan. And I do like Carson Wentz. As I say in my details of my bio, Carson Wentz is a top 10 quarterback in this league. I firmly believe that. I think the Eagles were stupid for getting rid of him and making him a pariah. I think Indianapolis was dumb for getting rid of him. And I think Washington may have an uptick to the season this year, as I stated, I think, a couple podcasts ago. And if you want to know more about my feelings on Carson Wentz, just let me know and I'll have a segment on Carson Wentz for you too. But today is not that day. He is in the NFC East now. But Matt Ryan's in the NFC or the AFC South, moving from the NFC South. And I think that is one of the very few upgrades that they could have made. Matt Ryan has been a consistent deliverer of results in this league, whether it be just from an individual statistics standpoint or winning. He has an MVP. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's been to multiple conference finals. Championship games. And so that's, he's a great player. And I think with the supporting cast that they have, Frank Reich being an incredible head coach, they're not going to take a step back. This team is going to be ready to move forward full bore with Jonathan Taylor and Matt Ryan. And as long as everybody stays healthy, I expect to also see an increase in the statistical value that Michael Pittman provides, as well as the rest of that receiving core. So you say, Alex, all right, you've told us why you think that these teams are going to be successful or unsuccessful. So what do you think their records are going to be? Well, right now, I have the Colts winning the division. That's the only thing that I will give you until we get to the playoff bracket of who I think is in the playoffs. But I have the Colts winning the division at 10-7. Maybe 11-6, but I'm going to be safe and say 10-7. They're not going to have a tied record with anybody else in their division, though. I think that the Titans get to 9-8. I think that the Jaguars get to 6-11, and I think the Texans get to 5-12. I think there's enough talent in this division that they can have wins against other divisions as well. I don't think that there's enough talent per team to have multiple playoff teams outside of your division winner. They may be able to sneak one in, and unless I'm missing something in Jacksonville, maybe two. But as of right now, I think only one team from this division is guaranteed a playoff spot. That being said, like I told you before, I didn't go through every single team's stuff yet, every single division's, information. And so I need to fully dive into those things for us as well before I officially give my determination on what the playoffs are going to look like. And so, like I said, Colts won, 10-7, 11-6 right there. Titans 9-8, Jaguars 6-11, Texans 5-12. That is your AFC South. And that's our show today, guys. That's it. We got more coming tomorrow. Like I said, we have a special edition podcast coming out where we're going to be asking, do we deserve better? As Sporting Kansas City fans, will we deserve better? And that comes out tomorrow. Thanks for listening today. Remember, rate, review, subscribe, listen, feedback. All of that fun stuff that we talk about, everybody talks about on every podcast. I love you guys so much for being here for me. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow with our special edition. And if you don't tune in for that, we'll see you episode 4. Thanks. Have a great day.